Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Let's go! Well, what can I say? A usual day in Russia. The rain of drones is going to Stalingrad, that's the old name of Volgograd city, Russian Federation. Recently Ukraine launches lots of the drone strikes there. Slaviansk town in Kuban was fired up a little, and also kabooms were heard in Angels, the place for the Russian military airfield. As you can see, Russia tries to use the air defense. There are some of the lights even there, but it doesn't help because there is the ground kaboom with some of the smoke coming. And this is Angel Saratov, probably military airfield infrastructure was hit. As locals reported, it was the Russian oil refinery that is now burning. The name of it is cracking and it's the biggest one in that area. As you can see, my friends, every night Ukraine performs those kind of the strikes on the Russian military and infrastructure facilities. If Ukraine continue to do so, it has the chance to paralyze the Russian military in the east because they will be in lack of the fuel and ammunition supplies. And the process itself is not that easy. After all, Russia has air defense, but the result is out there every day, and Russia propels much slower on the front lines compared to what it was before. Speaking about the front lines, let's check out what is happening. We have good news and bad news as usual. Most of those news are coming from the Pokros direction, where Ukraine, for example, started one more small counterattack towards village of Nadezhdinka before Russians tried to occupy it with this attack, but they were not successful. As you can see, Nadezhdinka is on the lower ground. So Ukraine here actually has some of the advantage over the Russian forces. And if we go to the Pokros city itself, here Ukraine has multiple of the counterattacks, and here Russia tries to get back Peshchane under control. Before, Ukrainian tanks were even spotted in this area in the western outskirts of Peshchane, but now Russia tries to assault from the industrial part of this town. For the last couple of days, Ukraine is not going further with its attacks in this area, like there were some of them small counterattacks, but they were in lack of the resource boost to continue. If Ukraine had an intention to strike Russia hard with a single counterstrike, well, Ukraine would concentrate enough forces in a single direction, here, but the idea now is to stop the Russian movement towards the city of Pokrovsk or the town of Pokrovsk, but still it's kind of the big town. But what's about the bad news? Well, they are coming from Dachne because Dachne was occupied by the Russian army. After all, Ukraine started the withdrawal, the forces from this pocket using this road. And the battle here will continue for Ulakli and later on Constantinople. Why has Ukraine started the withdrawal of the forces? Because Russians moved towards Andriivka over here, so they create the threat for those two villages. And it's better not to leave that pocket far away. Well, also Russians moved here a little and over here, but it's not a significant movement. So I expect that Russia will have the success in the coming days in this area, but Ukraine will have the success near Pokrovsk, not letting Russians to go further. The Michael 73 analytic also confirmed the Russian assault into Dachne, and they occupied this village. So there is one of the last buildings in Dachne with the Russian flag. That's how analytics basically confirm Russian or Ukrainian army movement by the drone images. As you see, recently Ukraine here lost 3 of the vehicles, but Russians lost vehicles too. Let's go and check. Yeah, we have the visual confirmation. Yeah, actually 2 of the vehicles, you can see those over here. The location is confirmed, so Russians tried to assault from the south towards Ulanki probably, but here is the river. It means that Ukraine monitors what is happening around with FPV drones, surveillance drones, and hit the Russian vehicles when it is possible. Russians also try to go further in Velika Novosilka area, so here we have a couple of those tanks. Let's check out the origin source. Yeah, it was the attack of the Russian army, which was stopped by the FPV drone from what I see, geolocated image. But Russia also uses their FPV drones, so they stopped the Ukrainian vehicle and finished it with FPV strike. By the way, my friends, if you want to support the job that I do here on YouTube, you may check out my Patreon page. I'll put the link for it in the video description just below. Thank you so much for supporting my motivation. In the Pokros direction, you see how Russians surrender. So here Russians surrender in Peshchane and also over here. A confirmation comes from the Deep State military map source. And if you check out the Deep State military map, definitely Russians move in this pocket. They also expand the bridgehead in Andriivka. But you know what? I also see how Russians move quite a lot in the Kharkiv direction. So it was like a couple of days ago, 3 days ago, and it is now. They're expanding north from Kupiansk, well, further away from Kupiansk, but anyways, they went to the small village of Vyholivka. And why would Putin concentrate his forces in the Kharkiv region? Because he hasn't put it into his constitution, as he've done with Kherson, Zaporizhia. Well, maybe it's the coming future plan of Putin. He wants to occupy Kharkiv region as well. So he uses this informational chaos around possible negotiations in his own favor. But still, the Russian army is not moving that fast as before. Good news. Maikos put here, do not steal. Yeah, I'm gonna put all of the reference for this analytic in the video description below. So it's not stealing, it's the propelling and some sort of the advertisement of this analytic, because he does pretty much good job analyzing drone videos and so on to show us the actual data of what is happening on the front lines, and usually what he shows is a real picture. So Maikos3, thank you so much for your awesome job that you do. He does not just Ukraine but also Middle East map. Some other news: the Wall Street Journal cites their sources telling that it was the friendly fire of the Ukrainian Patriot system which shut down Ukrainian F-16 several months ago. They say that Patriot system wasn't equipped with so-called Link 16 system, which is also used to identify enemy or friendly aircraft. Well, you see, by the time Patriots were supplied to Ukraine, no one thought that Ukraine would get F-16s. Well, apparently Ukraine got them, but Patriot systems were in lack of that critical upgrade with Link 16 system. So Patriots together with F-16s were used to defend Ukrainian sky. By the time Russia launched their cruise missiles, so Patriot system missed that missile and hit a fighter jet. As I've told you back then, a friendly fire is one of the most probable causes of this aviation accident. And it seems like it really is, unfortunately, because pilot also lost his life. He was a professional pilot with lots of the experience, but the lack of coordination and equipment unfortunately plays its bad role. Ukraine lost many of the fighter jets and other airplanes because of the friendly fire since the beginning of the war, especially, by the way, at the beginning of the war. Guys, as for the political news, I'll not put too much attention on that. Probably you already know those news from elsewhere, so you may make your own conclusions about what is happening. I just want to quote Donald Trump on his response of what side is guilty about this war. So we're gonna expedite a little and let's check it out.
Ukraine's NATO aspirations were one of the main reasons that the war broke out. Who do you blame for the war, Ukraine or Russia?
Well, I think that there were a lot of people to blame. All I can say is very simply, if I were president, that war would never have happened. And you know what?
So if a new president of the United States of America afraid to say a fact that Russia is aggressor, which started the war against Ukraine, that Russia is guilty for it, for me, everything is understandable. Unfortunately, guys, it's the reality we are currently living in. As some of the Ukrainian sources report, China entered Donbass with their companies to develop the occupied regions and get the access to the natural resources of Ukraine. Well, maybe it was also negotiated between Russia and China that China would continue their military support of Russia with their technologies at first, but Russia might give access to China for occupied territories of Ukraine to get the natural resources out, because Russia itself, well, it has already huge resources on its own territory. Then people say that this war is about Ukrainian resources. Well, I don't agree with that fully. Russia doesn't need that stuff in Ukraine for now. For Putin personally, it's more like ideological war. He wants to restore ex-Soviet empire or ex-Russian empire, to make Russia great again or something like that. About the yesterday's strike on Chernobyl nuclear power plant, the fourth reactor, you can see it's snowy weather there, and the drone debris were recovered. 100% it's the Russian Geran 2 drone, and experts say that luckily the drone hit just few meters away from the fourth reactor old confinement, and here is you can see the scale of the new confinement over the fourth reactor. Those are people relative to this construction, very tiny figures. So actually this hole is quite big, it's huge. Firefighters went inside and they did their best job there. The radiation level in the area is likely normal. So with the strike, Putin decided to show to the West that he is ready to start even a nuclear disaster if his demands would be ignored. And he doesn't care that Belarus and Russia are so close to Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Yeah, sorry, some more political stuff. It's about the United States military support. Here I will quote just Zelensky and his interview to United States press here.
Can Ukraine survive without U.S. military support?
Probably it will be very difficult. And of course, in all the difficult situations, you have a chance, but we will have low chance to survive without support of the United States. I think it's very important, critical. But I mean, I don't want to think about it. Yes, we have to think about it. I don't want to think that we will not be strategic partners. I don't want to think about it because it will make a pressure on morality of Ukrainians, and it will be worse the thing from the very beginning of the war. But we increased our production. That we really can count on our level of defending industry, but it's not enough.
Your concern being without U.S. military support, Ukraine would be vulnerable to another attack by Russia in another few years. Is that your concern?
Yes, I think this can be. This is really what he wants. He wants pause, prepare, trained, take off some sanctions because of ceasefire and etc.
So yeah, here I agree with Zelensky. For Ukraine, it will be really hard without military support from the United States, but for now it still continues. The worst thing actually United States may do is to abandon Ukraine, but there is pretty much high chance for it. By doing so, United States would not only abandon Ukraine, but European security. And many other dictators would be encouraged by inactive action of the United States. So Chinese special military operation in Taiwan will happen 100%. Nevertheless, my personal opinion that even without the military support from the United States, Ukraine has all of the chances to survive and withstand the Russian aggression. Yes, Russia would take more territories, which is not good at all, but European countries are determined to support Ukraine, plus Ukraine produces its own military, especially drones. So I wouldn't say that if United States abandons Ukraine, everything would go to hell right away. No, and just imagine if that possible variant works, how allies of the United States would look at United States, like the country which actually abandons its partners in the most critical time. Well, I think the global leadership already understood in many of the countries that the only way to protect yourself is to gain nuclear weaponry. The example is Ukraine. So actually it creates lots of the future threats for humanity in general, because the more nuclear countries out there, the harder it is to control that weaponry. That's one of the main reasons to support Ukraine in a military way. Well, we are not saying that United States is going to abandon Ukraine soon, but this variant is possible. Putin assembles team of heavyweights to negotiate Ukraine deal. As we know, negotiations will probably start in Saudi Arabia. But if we check out the situation on the front lines and also the situation with the Russian recruitment, it doesn't stop. Russia still hires soldiers, paying them millions of rubles, and they continue to throw wounded personnel right into the battles. For now, I don't see the steps from the Russian de-escalation. No, instead they escalate, even hitting fourth reactor of Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Moreover, for example, Mark Rutte says that Russia continued to intensify its military production. They receive components from their allies and capable to produce many of the artillery shells. He says that for 3 months Russia produces the same amount of the shells as European Union per year. So yeah, actually Europe should boost its military and there should be European army. I am telling you about it every time probably then we touch this topic. And here's about the state of the Russian economy. Ahead of the Russian Central Bank, Elvira Nabiullina comments about the key rate and inflation. She speaks Russian, but I'll put subtitles somewhere here because I know Russian and I will translate it for you.
Сегодня мы приняли решение сохранить ключевую ставку на уровне 21% годовых. Инфляция в конце года заметно ускорилась. По нашим оценкам, это было отражением существенного перегрева спроса, который мог даже усилиться во втором полугодии прошлого года. Ценовое давление остается значительным. Показатели устойчивой инфляции к концу года превысили 10%, что мы, безусловно, оцениваем как неприемлемо высокий уровень.
So even a head of the Russian Central Bank, Nabiullina, says about a terrible state of the Russian economy. And they keep the key rate of 21% just because Putin wants it. In Russia, Central Bank is not an independent institution. The key rate itself should have been roughly 25% already, which will make credits for the Russian military, which will make it possible for the Russian military production to take more loans. So they continue to take loans which they will not pay back, and inflation in Russia continue to rise despite the key rate. And I guess if Russian economy faces those tremendous issues, maybe that is why Putin wants some sort of the ceasefire, lifting the sanctions, which will allow him to produce more weapons and attack Ukraine once again after some time. Maybe it's his logic. Because if the situation in the Russian economy continue as it is right now, continue to deteriorate little by little, Russia would finally collapse. Putin may lose his power in Russia. And unfortunately, at this critical time, instead of pushing Russia even harder with more sanctions and so on, there are some of the talks to give up interests to Russia. Well, we'll see how it goes. I think the Russian economy will not survive this special military operation. And now, my friends, please don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so, you help me a lot. And as usual, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time.